The whisper in the dark, the space station hung above the dead moon like a silent crown of metal. Its lights burned weakly against the vast black of space, flickering in places where the maintenance teams had given up. For most of the galaxy, this station was nothing more than a meeting point, a place where soldiers, merchants, and diplomats crossed paths. But for Daniel Hale, it had become a cage. He stood on one of the open balconies that faced the stars, the cold wind of recycled air brushing against his skin. His uniform was simple, marked only with the faded emblem of Earth's fleet, a symbol that meant almost nothing out here among the alien powers. The humans were tolerated, but never respected. They were seen as weak, fragile bodies from a fragile world. And yet, as Daniel leaned forward against the railing, his eyes caught sight of her, the alien girl. She stood at the far edge of the station's promenade, her figure bathed in the dim blue glow of the corridor lamps. Her skin shimmered faintly, catching the light like liquid silver. Her long hair fell over her shoulders in smooth strands that almost glowed. Even among her own kind, the feared and untouchable Sarathi, she seemed different, lighter, more alive. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had seen many alien species during his short years in service, but none like her. There was something about the way she moved, the way her eyes, cold yet endless, seemed to watch the stars like she was searching for something beyond them. He didn't mean to whisper the words. They slipped from his lips like breath. "She's so beautiful," he murmured softly, the words carried away by the hum of the station's machines. He thought he was alone. He thought the night was his only witness. He thought no one could hear. But he was wrong. A shadow moved behind him. Quiet, steady footsteps echoed against the metal floor. Daniel's stomach sank. He turned slowly, his heart racing, his mind already preparing excuses in case it was one of the alien officers. And then he froze. She was standing right there. The alien girl, the one he had spoken about. Her eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting the faint light like twin shards of crystal. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face, his throat tightening as if the very air had turned against him. Had she understood? Did she know the words of his language? Most aliens dismissed human speech as crude, unworthy of study. But the Sarathi, they were different. Some said their ears were sharper than blades, that they could catch whispers even through the walls. Daniel cursed himself silently. Why had he let the words escape? Why had he lowered his guard in a place where every mistake could cost him his rank or even his life? The alien girl tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. Her people were known for their coldness, for their silence, for their refusal to mix with other races. Yet here she was, watching him closely, as if the whisper had cut deeper than a simple phrase. Daniel tried to look away, but her gaze pinned him in place. His voice broke. He swallowed hard and forced the words out again. "I didn't mean... I thought I was alone." Her lips parted slightly. For a moment, Daniel thought she might laugh or strike him down for daring to speak so carelessly. Instead, she said nothing. Her silence was heavier than any words. The hum of the station's engines filled the air, vibrating through the floor. Around them, the galaxy stretched endlessly, stars blinking like ancient eyes. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, every muscle tense, every thought screaming at him to leave. But his feet wouldn't move. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, smooth, and carried an accent that bent his language into something almost otherworldly. "Why would a human call me beautiful?" The question struck him harder than any accusation. It wasn't anger, it wasn't mockery, it was confusion, as if the idea had never crossed her mind. Daniel blinked, caught completely off guard. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. How could he explain? How could he tell her that in a galaxy filled with cold metal and cruel power, she was the First thing that felt alive, that her presence stirred something inside him that had been buried since Earth left him here as nothing more than a forgotten officer. But before he could answer, her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, studying him like a puzzle. And then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Her silver hair trailed behind her, catching the light one last time before she disappeared into the shadows of the corridor. Daniel exhaled sharply, his chest heavy. He leaned against the railing, trying to calm the storm inside him. His whisper had been heard, his secret exposed. And now, for the first time since he had arrived on this lonely station, Daniel felt that his life had just taken a turn he could not control. The alien's silence. The next morning, the station felt colder. Daniel Hale walked through the main corridor with his head down, pretending not to notice the stares from the alien officers. He told himself they were not watching him, but deep down he felt the weight of unseen eyes. Every whisper of metal, every hiss of the air vents reminded him of the night before, when his own whisper had been caught by the one person he should never have spoken about, the alien girl. Her face, her glowing eyes, her soft voice, it haunted him. "Why would a human call me beautiful?" she had asked, and then vanished into the shadows. Daniel had not slept after that. He lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice again and again. It was not anger in her words. It was not threat. It was something else, something he could not name. But her silence afterward had been worse. Now, as he made his way to the observation deck, Daniel tried to act normal. He wore his uniform neatly, his boots polished, his face steady. Humans were already seen as weak here. He couldn't afford to add fuel to the fire. He reminded himself that whispers fade. Maybe she had forgotten. Maybe she hadn't even cared. And yet, when the doors slid open to the deck, there she was. Liara. She stood near the wide glass wall, her hands behind her back, her long silver hair falling freely. The stars shone bright against the black void, and her figure looked like part of them, as if she belonged more to the heavens than to the station. Daniel stopped in his tracks. His first instinct was to leave, to avoid another confrontation. But his feet betrayed him, moving him forward one step at a time. She didn't turn when he approached. She didn't move, didn't speak. The silence was so sharp it felt alive, pressing down on his chest. Finally, Daniel stopped beside her, though he kept a respectful distance. He looked at her reflection in the glass instead of her face. "I owe you an apology," he said softly. His throat felt dry. "Last night, I spoke carelessly. I thought I was alone. If my words offended you, Her voice cut him off, low and quiet, yet powerful. "They did not offend me." Daniel blinked. Of all the things she could have said, this was not one he expected. He turned his head slightly, but she still did not look at him. Then, "Why did you ask me that?" he asked carefully. "Why ask why a human would call you beautiful?" Now she turned, slowly, her glowing eyes fixed on him, sharp and unreadable. Her face showed no anger, no warmth, only calm curiosity. "Because no one has ever said that to me," she said simply. "Not my people, not the council, not even my enemies. Beauty is not a word given to a Sarathi. We are feared, not admired." Daniel's breath caught. Her words were plain, but there was weight in them, the kind that spoke of a lifetime of isolation. He opened his mouth, searching for something to say, but nothing came. What could he offer her? A human's simple words against a galaxy's judgment? Liara's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer. Then she turned back to the stars. Silence, stretched again, heavy and suffocating. Daniel wanted to speak, to tell her that what he said had been real, that it had not been a slip or a joke. But his tongue refused to move. He stayed there beside her, both of them looking out at the endless void. After several minutes, she finally spoke again. Her voice was softer now, almost like a whisper. "You do not understand what you've said." Daniel frowned. What do you mean? She didn't answer. Her silence returned, thicker than before. It was as if her words had been a door half opened, only for her to slam it shut again. Daniel's chest tightened with frustration and curiosity. The silence dragged on until footsteps echoed behind them. 2 alien officers entered the deck, their armor clinking. They cast quick glances at Daniel, their expressions cold, then turned their eyes on Liara. Both bowed their heads slightly in respect. "Commander," one of them said in the Sarathi tongue. Daniel didn't understand the words, but the gesture told him enough. She was important, more important than he had realized. Liara didn't reply. She stood unmoving, watching the stars. The officers looked uncomfortable at her silence, then left without another word. Daniel realized then that her silence wasn't only for him. It was her shield, her weapon. She lived in it, controlled it. And yet last night she had broken that silence for him. He swallowed, his thoughts racing. Before he could say anything else, Liara finally stepped away. She walked past him without a glance, her presence leaving a trail of cold air behind her. As the doors closed behind her, Daniel stood alone, his hands tightening into fists. He didn't know what she meant. He didn't know why she stayed silent, or why his words mattered at all. But he knew one thing. This was not the end. The whisper had reached deeper than he thought, and her silence was only the beginning. The hidden bond, the days after their strange encounter, passed slowly, like heavy shadows dragging across the station. Daniel Hale tried to bury himself in routine, reports, maintenance checks, drills. But no matter how he filled his hours, one thought stayed with him, the alien girl, Liara. Her silence had left more questions than answers. Why had she cared about his words? Why had she told him that no one had ever called her beautiful? Why of all people had she not pushed him away? He wanted to forget. He told himself it was safer to keep his distance, but fate had other plans. It began with an unexpected assignment. The station commander called Daniel to the briefing hall, where alien officers stood around a holographic table showing the outer rim sectors. To Daniel's surprise, Liara was there too, standing apart from the others, her glowing eyes fixed on the map of shifting stars. "You will join the inspection team," the commander announced, his voice deep and sharp. "Sector 9 has gone silent. We must confirm if it is a communications failure or an enemy presence." Daniel's stomach twisted. An outer patrol? With them? With her? But he gave no protest. Humans had little choice here. Hours later, he found himself on a small escort ship, seated across from Liara in the cramped passenger bay. The silence between them was thick again, but different now. Less sharp, more waiting, as if something invisible lingered in the air. The ship rattled as it cut through the void. Daniel adjusted his gear nervously, then glanced at her. She sat perfectly still, her posture strong, her gaze steady on the viewing port. He cleared his throat. "You don't have to worry. If there's trouble, I'll do my part." Her head turned slightly. For the first time, there was the faintest curve in her lips. Not quite a smile, but not coldness either. "I do not doubt that," she said quietly. The words surprised him more than any insult could have. She didn't doubt him. A Sarathi, one of the most feared species, saying she trusted a human? Daniel didn't know how to respond. He only nodded, pretending to check his rifle to hide his expression. The mission itself was uneventful at first. The inspection team landed on an abandoned listening post, its corridors dark, wires hanging like vines, screens flickering with static. Daniel stayed close to Liara as the group moved in formation. He told himself it was only for safety, but part of him felt a strange calm near her, as if her silent presence kept fear away. Then it happened. A sudden blast rocked the corridor. Metal screeched as enemy drones poured out from hidden alcoves, their red optics glowing. The team scattered into cover, energy bolts flashing through the air. Daniel moved without thinking. A drone leapt at Liara's side, its claws snapping. He raised his rifle and fired, the shot tearing through the machine's chest. The drone collapsed at her feet, smoking and twitching. Liara turned, her glowing eyes locking onto his. For a brief moment in the chaos, everything around them fell silent. She gave him a single nod, a warrior's thanks. The battle raged, but side by side they pushed forward, covering each other's blind spots, fighting as if they had trained together for years. When the last drone fell, the corridor lay littered with broken machines. The others regrouped, murmuring in their native tongues, casting glances at Daniel and Liara. Whispers spread, sharp and low. He didn't understand the words, but he didn't need to. He knew what suspicion sounded like. Back on the ship, the tension grew. Alien officers avoided them, whispering in corners. Daniel pretended not to notice, but his unease deepened. He had seen that kind of look before, when soldiers marked someone as different, as dangerous. That night, back in his quarters, Daniel found something pinned to his door. A thin strip of metal with etched words in the common tongue. Stay away from... or else. He froze, the message heavy in his hand. His mind raced. Who had written it? Other officers? Her own people? Whoever it was, they wanted him gone. But as he stood there in the dim corridor, the memory of her nod, her soft words, "I do not doubt that," came back to him. And for the first time since arriving on the station, Daniel realized something. The galaxy might fear her. Others might warn him. But somewhere in the silence, a bond had begun to form. Fragile, dangerous, but real. The rising threat. The warning note burned in Daniel's mind long after he crumpled it in his fist. Stay away from her, or else. The words were carved sharp, like they had been pressed into the thin strip of metal with anger. He hid it in his locker, but the threat stayed with him, following like a shadow. The station was no longer the same. Every corridor seemed colder, every glance sharper. Wherever Daniel went, he felt eyes tracking him. Some alien officers whispered when he passed, their voices low, their expressions dark. Others didn't bother to hide their contempt, sneering openly at the human soldier who dared stand beside Liara. And Liara, she remained silent. She went about her duties without pause, her silver hair flowing behind her like a banner, her glowing eyes unreadable. But Daniel noticed small changes, how she lingered longer in corridors where he worked, how her gaze flicked toward him when she thought no one was watching. It was not affection, not yet, but it was awareness, a thread connecting them in the silence. The thread, however, was fragile. One evening in the main hall, the tension finally broke. Daniel was reviewing a tactical report when 3 Sarathi officers approached. Their armor gleamed black, marked with the insignia of high rank. They stood tall, their presence casting a shadow over the table. The hall grew quieter as others turned to watch. Human, one of them said in accented common tongue. His voice was sharp like a blade drawn across stone. You forget your place. Daniel straightened, his jaw tightening. I'm only doing my duty. Your duty, the officer hissed, is not to interfere with ours. You walk too close, to one who is not meant for you. Daniel's pulse quickened. He knew who they meant. Before he could reply, Liara stepped into the hall. The air seemed to change instantly. Conversation stopped, eyes shifted, the silence thickened. She walked toward them, calm, her gaze steady, her presence undeniable. The officers turned stiffly, bowing their heads. Commander, one muttered. Liara looked at them for a long, cold moment, then shifted her eyes to Daniel. He expected her to ignore him, to let the moment pass. Instead, she spoke. He has earned his place, she said clearly, her voice carrying through the hall. The words struck like thunder. The Sarathi officers stiffened, their eyes narrowing in shock. Around them, whispers rippled through the crowd. No Sarathi ever defended a human, not in public, not in front of witnesses. Daniel's chest tightened. Her words had been few, but they carried more weight than any shield he could have asked for. Yet at the same time, he knew what it meant. She had just made him a target, not only for suspicion but for hatred. The officers said nothing. They bowed once more, then turned and left, their silence more dangerous than any threat. As the hall slowly returned to its rhythm, Daniel found himself staring at Liara. She met his gaze for a moment, then turned away without another word. But the damage was done. That night, rumors spread faster than wildfire. He overheard them in the mess hall, in the training chambers, even in the engine decks. Some whispered that the human had bewitched her. Others claimed he was a spy, using her as a shield. Some laughed cruelly, saying it was only a matter of time before both of them were crushed under the weight of their own foolishness. Daniel tried to ignore it, but the voices crawled under his skin. He had seen suspicion before. Among soldiers, suspicion could kill quicker than bullets. He felt the storm building, and he knew it would not stop. Then the alarm sounded. The piercing cry of the station's emergency sirens tore through the corridors. Lights shifted from white to deep red, pulsing in rhythm with the blaring horns. Daniel rushed to the nearest command screen, his heart pounding. Enemy signatures. Multiple. Fast approaching. The Sarathi officers scrambled into formation, their voices sharp and urgent. Energy shields flared to life, weapons powered up. The entire station shook as the first impact trembled through the hull. Daniel's blood ran cold. This was no drill. Someone out there had chosen this exact moment, when the station was divided, when whispers and suspicion already weakened them, to strike. In the chaos, his eyes found Liara across the deck. She was calm, her face like carved stone, but her eyes glowed brighter than ever, and for the first time since the whisper that had started it all, Daniel felt something new in the silence. Not just fear, but war. Fire in the stars. The station shuddered as another blast struck its outer hull. Sirens wailed through the corridors, the red warning lights flashing like the heartbeat of a wounded beast. Daniel Hale steadied himself against a railing, his ears ringing with the thunder of impact. All units to defense positions. A commander's voice roared over the comms. "Enemy ships incoming!" The crew scattered, rushing to their posts. Daniel grabbed his rifle and sprinted toward the hangar bay. His boots pounded against the metal floor, each step echoing with urgency. The air was filled with shouts, the crackle of weapons charging, and the low, dreadful hum of the station's shield system straining under fire. When he reached the hangar, his breath caught. Through the open bay shield he could see them, sleek black warships cutting through the void, their hulls bristling with weapons. Energy bolts streamed toward the station like falling stars. The Sarathi soldiers prepared their fighters, climbing into sleek interceptors. Daniel knew he wasn't meant for the front line. Humans were often pushed to support duty. But before anyone could stop him, he strapped on a harness and ran toward the weapons platform. And then he saw her. Liara. She stood at the edge of the hangar, her armor gleaming under the red lights, her long silver hair pulled back, her glowing eyes fixed on the battle outside. For a moment, Daniel froze. She looked untouchable, like a figure carved from light and shadow. But when her gaze flicked to him, there was no coldness. There was recognition. "Stay close," she said simply. Her voice cut through the chaos. Daniel nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. The bond between them, fragile, unspoken, felt suddenly like a lifeline. The attack began in full. Enemy drones swarmed through the shield, metal bodies hissing, weapons glowing. The hangar erupted in fire. Bolts of energy sliced through the air, striking walls, ships, and soldiers alike. Screams filled the chamber as fighters exploded before they could launch. Daniel dove behind a cargo crate, firing at the nearest drone. His shot struck true, tearing it apart in a shower of sparks. Another swooped down, claws extended, but Liara was already moving. Her blade flashed, a curved weapon that hummed with power. With one swift strike, the drone split in two, crashing lifeless to the floor. They fought side by side, back to back. Every time Daniel covered her flank, she covered his. Every time she stepped forward with her blade, he followed with his rifle. Around them, the station shook, the war spilling into every corridor. The enemy pressed harder, their numbers endless. Daniel's arms ached, his ears rang, his chest burned with every breath, but he refused to fall back. Not while she was still, standing. At one point, a massive drone crashed down from the ceiling, its armored frame towering over them. Its weapon spun, charging with deadly light. Daniel knew he wouldn't reach cover in time. He lifted his rifle anyway, ready to fire even if it meant nothing. But Liara moved faster. She leapt forward, her blade slicing through the machine's core with a blinding strike. Sparks exploded as the drone collapsed at Daniel's feet. She landed gracefully, her chest rising with sharp breaths. Then for the briefest moment she turned to him, her hand brushing his arm. "You fight. Like no other human," she whispered. The words struck deeper than the chaos around them. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. Not from fear, but from something else, something stronger. The battle raged on. Minutes felt like hours. Slowly, the defenders began to push the enemy back, their weapons cutting through the remaining drones. At last, the final one fell, its broken frame crashing to the hangar floor. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the groans of the wounded. Smoke filled the air, the acrid scent of burning circuits stinging Daniel's throat. He leaned against a crate, his body trembling with exhaustion. Liara stood nearby, her blade dripping with sparks, her glowing eyes scanning the room. And then, in the middle of the wreckage, she did something no one expected. She stepped, closer to him, her voice low, meant only for his ears. "Now," she whispered, "I understand your words." Daniel's heart pounded. His whisper, "She's so beautiful," echoed back to him in her voice. She remembered. She understood. For the first time, her silence was gone. Before he could respond, the comms crackled again, the commander's voice urgent. "All units, prepare. Enemy ships regrouping. This battle isn't over." The moment shattered. Liara pulled back, her face returning to stone. But Daniel saw it, the flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear, not doubt, something closer to trust. The fire in the stars was only beginning. The choice. The battle ended, but the war inside the station was only beginning. The hangar was a graveyard of twisted drones and broken ships. Smoke curled upward, the air heavy with the stench of burnt metal. Medics rushed between the wounded, their voices sharp and hurried. Daniel Hale sat on a crate, his rifle resting across his knees. His arms ached, his uniform was scorched, and his heart still thundered from the fight. But it wasn't the enemy he feared now. It was what came next. The whispers began almost immediately. Some of the Sarathi soldiers muttered in their own tongue, casting dark looks toward Daniel. Others spoke in common speech so he could hear. The human hides behind her. He only lived because she let him. Why does the commander protect him? The words cut deep, sharper than any blade. Daniel clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay quiet. He had survived drones, explosions, fire, but gossip and suspicion were more dangerous here than any weapon. Then came the order. Daniel was summoned to the council chamber. He followed 2 armored guards through the station's twisting corridors. Their steps were heavy, their silence colder than chains. When the doors finally slid open, he stepped into a vast room of shadows and steel. At the center stood the high platform where the Sarathi Council gathered, leaders cloaked in black, their glowing eyes burning down from above, and beside them stood Liara. Her face was calm, unreadable as always, but Daniel saw the tension in her stance. She was not here by choice. A voice boomed from the counselors. "Human Daniel Hale, you stand accused of stepping beyond your station, of breaking order, of drawing the commander of our kind into disgrace. What say you?" Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to shout, to tell them he had done nothing wrong, that he had only fought, only survived. But the words stuck. He knew no defense would matter. He was human, already guilty in their eyes. Before he could speak, Liara stepped forward. "He fought," she said, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "When the enemy came, he did not run. He fought at my side, he saved my life. And I, in turn, saved his." This is not disgrace. It is truth. Gasps rippled through the chamber. A commander of the Sarathi, speaking in defense of a human, and, in front of the council itself, the councilors shifted, their glowing eyes narrowing in suspicion. You choose strange words, Liara, one hissed. To call him your equal? She lifted her chin, her glowing gaze unwavering. I speak what is real. Without him, the hangar would have fallen. Without him, many of us would be dead. The chamber fell silent. Daniel's heart pounded. She was defending him. Again. But this time the risk was far greater. By speaking those words, she was putting her rank, her future, even her life in a. One counselor leaned forward. If this is truth, then let him stand trial by bond. If he is nothing, he will fall. If he is worthy, then both will share the outcome. Do you accept? Daniel froze. Trial by bond. He had heard rumors of it, a Sarathi custom, where two stood together in judgment. If one failed, both paid the EI price. It was rarely invoked and never with a human. He looked at Liara. Her face was still unreadable, but her eyes, those glowing, endless eyes, were fixed on him, waiting, asking. This was his choice. Step back, stay silent, and save himself. Or step forward, bind himself to her and risk everything. His chest tightened. He remembered the whisper that had started it all. She's so beautiful. Words he thought no one had heard. And now, here he was, with the galaxy watching, forced to decide what those words truly meant. He stepped forward. I accept, Daniel said firmly. His voice echoed through the chamber, steady despite the fear twisting in his gut. The counselors leaned back, murmuring among themselves. One finally spoke. Then it is decided. Human and commander will face trial together. The bond will judge their worth. The guards struck their spears against the floor. The sound echoed like thunder. Daniel felt the weight of the decision sink into him, heavier than any armor. He glanced at Liara. For the first time, she looked at him not with silence, but with something deeper, something close to respect. She gave a small, almost invisible nod. The choice had been made. But as Daniel left the chamber, escorted by guards, one thought burned in his mind. This was no longer about a whisper, no longer about a single bond. This was about survival, about standing against a galaxy that wanted him crushed. And now, for better or worse, he was bound to her. The last whisper. The trial chamber was silent when Daniel Hale entered. Tall pillars rose into the dark ceiling, glowing faintly with strange symbols. Rows of Sarathi soldiers lined the walls, their armor black and gleaming, their eyes sharp and watchful. At the far end, the council sat upon high thrones, their glowing gazes fixed on him, and beside him stood Liara. She wore full ceremonial armor, polished until it reflected the chamber's dim light. Her silver hair had been tied back, her face calm but unreadable. Yet Daniel felt the weight of her presence beside him like a steady flame. They were bound now. Her trial was his, and his was hers. A counselor's voice boomed through the hall. This human dares walk beside one of our own. He dares whisper words not meant for his kind. He dares bind himself where he does not belong. The bond will decide his worth. The trial began. A holographic circle flared to life beneath their feet. Strange patterns of light wrapped around them, tightening like invisible chains. Daniel felt the energy press against his chest, heavy, testing, as if the chamber itself was measuring his soul. You will face judgment together, the counselor declared. If one falters, both fall. The light shifted. The first test came as a vision. The chamber dissolved, and suddenly Daniel was standing in a battlefield of fire. Shadows moved through the smoke, endless enemies rushing at him. His rifle appeared in his hands, but when he pulled the trigger, it clicked empty. A trap. The shadows closed in. Daniel clenched his fists, ready to fight barehanded. Then he felt it, a hand brushing against his arm. Liara stood beside him, her blade glowing in the smoke. Stand with me, she said. Together they fought, Daniel struck with his fists, his strength raw and desperate, while Liara's blade carved through the shadows like lightning. Side by side, they held the line until the vision shattered. Back in the chamber, the counselors murmured. The first test was passed. The second test struck deeper. The chamber filled with voices, whispers of fear, of hatred. Daniel heard them all. You are nothing. You are weak. She will abandon you. You will die alone. The voices clawed at him, pulling him down. He felt his knees buckle, his chest tightened with doubt. Then Liara's voice cut through, sharp and steady. Do not listen. Look at me. He lifted his head. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, strong and unyielding. Her hand found his again, not as a commander, not as an alien, but as someone who refused to let go. The voices faded. The second test was passed. Then came the final trial. The holographic light blazed, forming a massive figure before them, an ancient Sarathi judge, tall as the pillars, its eyes burning like stars. Its voice thundered, "Human, speak why you deserve to stand here." Daniel's heart pounded. His throat went dry. Every eye in the chamber was on him. He could feel their hatred, their disbelief, their readiness to see him fall. He thought of lying, of inventing some clever speech, but then he remembered the whisper, the one that had begun all of this. Simple, honest words that had slipped out when he thought no one heard. He took a breath. "Because I spoke the truth," he said. His voice was steady, carried by something deeper than fear. "I called her beautiful, not for her power, not for her rank, but because she is. And I won't take those words back. Not here, not ever." Silence. The chamber held its breath. Then, slowly, Liara stepped forward. Her armor gleamed, her eyes glowed brighter than ever, and for the first time her voice rose not in a whisper, but in a declaration. "And I call him worthy. Not because he is human, not because he is soldier, but because he stood when no one else would. He fought beside me when others faltered. He spoke when others stayed silent. And I will not take those words back either." The counselors stirred. Shock rippled through the crowd. For a Sarathi commander to stand so openly with a human, it broke centuries of silence, centuries of walls. The great judge's fiery gaze dimmed. The holographic light dissolved. "The bond holds," the voice said. "They are judged, together." The trial ended. The counselors said no more. Some scowled, some whispered, but none could deny the outcome. The bond had not broken. As the chamber emptied, Daniel stood frozen, his chest heavy with relief. Then he felt Liara beside him, closer than before. She leaned slightly, her voice low, for him alone. "You whispered once when you thought no one could hear," she said. "Now the whole galaxy has heard you." Daniel let out a shaky breath, a small smile tugging at his lips. He leaned closer, whispering back, "She's beautiful." This time he didn't care who listened. And in that silence, standing side by side, a human and an alien, they had already changed everything.